right, thanking God again for strategic repetition, the kind that helps our retention. Let's call Mark chapter 14, which gives us another description of what we saw already in Matthew, and that is the plot to kill Jesus. Let's call it pretense. Pretense. Why? Because that is a word that literally came up. Which chapter was that? I think it was in chapter 12 where it talks about the scribes saying in verse 40, who devour widows' houses and for a pretense make long prayers. A word that not only connects back to that chapter, but connects back to the concept that I think we saw in the triumphal entry, where we realized that Jesus was an interesting contrast to Jerusalem at large because he was who he appeared to be, entering a city in which very little, I can't say it that way, in which much of it was not what it appeared to be. And even more importantly, it was not what it should be. Jesus set the standard by not only appearing or being what he appeared to be, but being what he should be. And in the plot to kill Jesus, that whole concept of pretense, I think, is going to get I think we'll get a chance to get a more in-depth look at that whole concept of pretense, getting a closer look at why Jerusalem was not what it appeared to be. As in the first two verses, we are going to see the scribes trying to arrest him by stealth and kill him. But because of their fear of an uproar from the people, they were once again, just as they were asking questions under the pretense of simply wanting information, they didn't want truth, they just wanted an excuse. Likewise, it's not the questions. It's since they have already been shut down in the questions that they were using to probe and try to find weaknesses in him, now they are looking for another route to, under the pretense of being God's people, they're simply looking for an excuse to harm Jesus. Going on in verses 3 through 9, it's going to talk about his anointing at Bethany, understanding that even though his apostles were those who walked most closely with him, sometimes closeness can actually blind us to the realities that he has now told them about multiple times, as we saw in Wednesday night class, our discussion, that this woman seemed to understand what was on deck even more than the apostles that he had told over and over again, that he was about to die and he was about to be, as we know by the end of the story, he's going to be crucified. And so sometimes her detached perspective, matched with a respect and a reverence for him, allowed her to see things that even his closest friends couldn't. Why? Because as we are going to see in verses 10 through 11, one of them was functioning under the pretense of being a friend, but he, like the scribes, was simply looking for an opportunity to get what he could get out of the relationship, helping us to see that, as we mentioned, Judas, in the environment of other people who, as flawed as they might have been, were legitimately following Jesus, might have been able to more easily take on the appearance of holiness around other people who generally had pure intentions, even if, as we said, they were extremely flawed. However, once he was given the opportunity in a place where there were more people with pretense, that side of his character made itself known, reminding us that it is so important to work on character during good times, because opportunity often exposes what's really on our heart if we haven't taken the time to beg God to help counsel us out of our character flaws and our character defects. Going on, though, in verses 12 through 21, he is going to have Passover with his disciples, where he is going to expose the fact that one of them, eventually to be known or exposed as Judas, is going to betray him. He is then going to institute the Lord's Supper in verses 22 through 25, going on to say in verses 26 through 31, as we have mentioned before, even though it may be a different type of betrayal, his own apostles are going to betray him as well, helping us to understand that the difference between personality and character, something we talk about a whole lot, is not always a sinister or a cognizant projection of a fake front. His own apostles, as well-intentioned as they are, as we have mentioned before, understanding Matthew's description of their betrayal, of all the flaws that they have that they seem to be aware of, this level of betrayal is not one that they have realized that they are capable of too. Even if they aren't a Judas, they still have a point a breaking point, for lack of a better term, that we're going to see in verses 32 through 42, where Jesus is going to go to the garden to pray, where he is going to help them understand, at least the teaching point for me in my own walk, is that there are certain levels of courage that I'm confident only God can give. And as he is going to say, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. It seems to be the biggest takeaway for me from that statement. Even when I have my motives and my heart in the right place, there are just certain weak points that I need God to fill in so that my actions can actually meet my aspirational me, the me that I really would like to be. But I'm flat out, without God, too weak to be. As we're going to see him betrayed by the time we get to verse 42, the phrase, "Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand," introducing the Judas kiss in verses 43 through 50, fulfilling the prophecies about his betrayal, understanding that his betrayal was a more sinister, conscious, volitional betrayal of the Christ. There's a young man, however, unnamed, who seems likewise to have it in his heart to follow Christ, but the heat gets too hot and he flees as well, noting that he is a young man who had nothing more than a linen cloth on his body, and in his attempt to flee, they captured the cloth, but not the young man, so he ran away naked, is noted in verse 52, as verses 53 through 65 are going to help us see the pretense of the trial, understanding that most of the people who are assembled to bring Jesus to trial already have it made up in their mind. But to maintain the appearances of holiness, righteousness, justice, and fairness, they give him a trial, even though the trial is filled with faulty testimony and frayed facts. I just made that up. Anyway, bottom line is they already knew what they wanted to do, had nothing to do with right or wrong, but in order to maintain their image, understanding how he's already at length in Matthew 23, and also it points here in Mark's description of the opposition, he's talked about how important appearances are to them, so that even in the midst of all the dirt they're doing, they're going to do whatever they can to protect their image, no matter how evil their motives. Understanding that the end of the chapter is going to show the end of the trial, leading up to Peter trying to overcome his fear to follow Jesus and having it proved to him just what Christ was saying. As willing as his spirit was to be loyal, his flesh is going to be weak, as verses 66 through 72 are going to describe the way in which Christ said that before the rooster crows twice, Peter will deny the Christ 3 times. In a chapter that reminds me of the danger in 2 types of pretense. One, it's formed by the lies that we tell to others. The other danger in pretense is probably founded on the lies we tell to ourselves, as we have seen. The lies told by the scribes in their outward appearance masking more sinister motives. Likewise, in Judas, his outward appearance as one of the guys, likewise masking more sinister motives, and the pretentious trial that they offered Jesus just to maintain their image, even though they had no interest in justice whatsoever, being that kind of pretense founded on the lies we project or tell to others. However, his own apostles, at least the ones that were legitimate apostles, legitimately interested in his best interest, still had weak points founded on the lies that we can tell to ourselves, wanting to believe that we are more courageous than we honestly have the power to be without God, which is one of the reasons why we sometimes say, my prayer for you is my prayer for me. May God open our hearts to accept his counsel, to guide us out of the pitfalls that come from both types of pretense. The pretense that's founded on the lies we can be pressured to tell to others, and likewise, the pretense that's founded on the lies that we can tell to ourselves.